Hello, everyone. It's the one and only, the world famous Settlers Lament back here again. I don't know. I feel as though my especially exhausted description to this live stream helps illustrate just how exhausting of a topic this is. And the reason why we're even on this topic to begin with is because of some recent stuff that's been going on with AA, who I see is here in the chat, as well as a stream that Dave did the other day, and some other related things, some tweets I've seen on Twitter recently, with a lot of coomers, and especially right-wing or so-called right-wing coomers, rearing their ugly head and and claiming that that's really the real based right-wing thing to do is to be dominated by your passions. And that's why today I wanted to have a stream on the phenomenon of the Coomer-Right, a phrase which our friend here, Cringe Walker, invented.
Oh dear God.
Yes, Cringe Walker, I think that was an especially inspired invention of yours, the phrase Coomer-Right.
Well, we're at it. Cringe Walker, were you the person who invented the DAD acronym, the deracinated American dipshit?
That I did not create, though.
I don't know who did, but I'm going to find him and thank him.
I don't think I've even heard that one before.
It is an element of the Coomer-Right, but deracinated American dipshit is a red state kind of yeehaw guy who likes big-breasted women and all this degenerate stuff, getting drunk, but at the same time is a conservative. You know, the kind of idiocracy variety, I think.
I know exactly what you mean. I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, I mean, you can find them anywhere in the States. These, sports ball obsessed, alcohol consuming, mainly craft beer, cheap beer, and just, they go to church, but maybe once every 2 months or something. Just they're nice Christmas and Easter attendee, and they are degenerates. Yeah, no, those certainly exist everywhere in the States.
Yeah, no, that's that is also true. But I feel like the tweets that I've collected may be a good place to get this started. So that's your that's your cue, 21st. There's just, this again is just really exhausting stuff. But there's and most people here have probably already seen these tweets. But there's been a couple of tweets that have shown up on Twitter recently that really exemplify just how terrible this Coomer-Right thing is. Yeah, that's what I want to show. And 21st, I don't know why you're not sharing your screen yet. I feel like I've given you lots of time.
My stuff froze up for a second.
Okay,
1 second.
thanks. So is this going to be a while?
You failed as a minion.
Yeah.
All right. Well, which one? Okay, I think I'm sharing right now. So.
Yeah.
Which one do we look at?
You're not signed in.
This is a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, yeah, that's the point. I don't want to.
Okay. Yeah. So this first one, men must sleep with many women to fully understand their nature. You won't know how to fix a sink by just reading about it, and you won't become an expert at fixing sinks by only fixing one.
I mean, I guess if your nature is to be a slut, then yeah. But I mean, this doesn't make any sense because, well, yeah, you have to repair a lot of sinks to understand how sinks work. But why do you have to sleep with a bunch of women to understand yourself?
Maybe this might have a certain analogy if it was something like you need to blow up a bunch of sinks or ruin a bunch of sinks or demolish a bunch of sinks. At least the analogy would be a little less mixed at that stage. The critical missing step is that this behavior destroys your sexuality at the same time it explores it. So maybe if you imagine some destructive sink exploratory surgery, then you might have a case.
Well, yeah, it's like if you were repairing a sink, instead of like taking it apart correctly, you just like bashed it with a hammer and you got to the part that was broken, and then you quote unquote fixed it that way instead of doing it right. I don't know. I mean, the analogy is just wrong. So whatever, to the extent that anything that follows is based on this analogy, it's built on a bad logical premise.
Yeah, you only need to learn on one sink. It's like, you only need one gun to learn how to shoot. It's kind of basic science.
And also, analogies aren't arguments anyway. Analogies are for explaining things, but you can't make an argument based on this analogy anyway, even if we're right. I mean, what you would do with a sink has absolutely nothing to do with your nature or sex or whatever. I mean, they're just not related at all. So this whole argument by analogy thing is just a really bad trap some people fall into.
Well,
ultimately, it doesn't matter.
The purpose of the analogy is to slip in that premise saying, it's right for me to explore my nature in like certain territories, but that's literally like an Apple situation.
I think I also want to point out that this, at least for me, this is one of the reasons why I've always seen why old-fashioned ways of doing marriage, like with arranged marriages, typically produces long. Like if you know any statistics, arranged marriages typically last longer because you're forced to learn to love the person. And I think the idea that the West has that you get to kind of find the perfect match is a bit half a delusion and half part of our hyper individualism. In the past, even in the West, only like a generation or two ago, people would arrange who you got married with pretty regularly, and you would learn to love the person because you understood you can't divorce the person and you have to stay with it for the sake of the family. I think that's something that you can't bring that back, obviously, but it was one of the safeguards against this.
Well, I mean, if you were a Lutheran, perhaps you wouldn't understand that you can't divorce the person. But
Lutheran or Anglican?
Yeah, that's Anglicans.
Well, Anglicans did not have legalized divorce until the 2000s. Lutheranism has always permitted divorce. Yes, I want to get into the historiographical point of the divorces of Henry VIII. Or I guess I'm about to do that. But Henry VIII always maintained that, and the Anglican Church for that matter, that what we call the divorces that he had were annulments. The word annulment did not exist back then, which is why history knows them as divorces. But because the term divorce was used both for annulments and what we would call divorce back then, the term annulment came about after the time of Henry VIII. But the Anglican Church maintained the same view as the Catholic Church until the 2000s, I believe. But no, Lutherans, Presbyterians, most other Protestant groups, based on their denial of the sacramentality of marriage, have not held to the indissolubility of marriage. That's also true. Eastern Orthodox don't believe. Eastern Orthodox permit divorce also. But sorry, that's all besides the point. I know. Yeah, I don't really have much else to add on this particular tweet. I don't really know who this person is. He's supposed to be, I don't know. He's supposed to be some sort of right-wing account. I get the impression he's like some sort of right-wing, like, I don't know, Nietzschean or something like that. He doesn't strike me as a Christian of any type, even even claiming to be a Christian.
No, I believe he is the Bronze Age pervert sphere.
Yeah, that's what it appears to be.
Very succinct number of likes on that tweet, I think.
Yeah, very.
Wow.
Oh.
It is quite funny because
you hate to see it.
Because in the book of Daniel, like chapter 11, it talks. We were just going through the book of Daniel at my church, and so this beast is supposed to represent himself as perfection, and 666 is the number of the beast, and it's like, oh no, I am above reproach. I'm righteous. I'm like the good guy, right? And then the Antichrist is clearly not the good guy. And this guy's like, also, oh, I'm a Catholic. I'm one of you. And then he just goes and espouses like, well, stuff that is clearly against God's will for Catholics and Christians alike. And I think that, sorry, Settler. I just, I think that, this.
Well, just to be clear, this guy I don't think claims to be a Christian. It's one of the other figures we'll be getting to that.
He says reactionary edgelord politics with the Mediterranean aesthetic.
Yeah. That Mediterranean aesthetic is the Bronze Age pervert stuff. But all of these quote-unquote Catholics, they definitely have the sort of Steve Buscemi vibes, you pick their t-shirt to say something like Pope fan or something like that.
well, I think the best way to tell these people apart is their what they're posting about, what their priorities are. You can follow these influencer accounts that are kind of in the right wing, like Bapsphere, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, but I only post about obtaining personal power, money, and success for myself, and never prioritize that which like a real practicing Christian would, and that's sharing of the gospel and honoring the Lord. So
that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually think the rest of the thread is kind of interesting. It's somewhat long, but I mean, he literally says, to start, a poll I did once that showed 30% of my male followers have never had sex before. This is not good. So this tweet is mainly speaking to men who want more experience with a woman. Some men fall very hard for their first love. Sometimes this works out, but quite often it does not. Some men never learn how to stand up to women, get walked over all over by them, and the woman never respects him. Very often she will cheat on him or leave him for someone more alpha. Yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's just...
Well, this is part of the balance, because in some ways what he's describing is the fact that if you are someone who's like saving yourself before marriage, it's the right thing to do. But how do you train up a man to also keep his masculinity in doing that? Because he's going to be...
They're not mutually exclusive. What?
Yeah. I agree. Like, but what I'm saying is like the typical product of that in the American culture is like kind of a feminized man, unfortunately. And I'm wondering, how can you fix that problem?
It's not the result of that. That was caused by other things.
But the American culture.
He ends it by saying, the problem is not degeneracy. It's awkward people who don't know how the opposite sex works, because they've been memed into thinking men should be more like women, yada, yada.
I'll agree with that, but that doesn't mean you should sleep around, right?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff he says later, it's not entirely wrong, but the overall recommendation is a bad one.
Right, well, that's like...
I think you could delete everything but the first sentence.
It's like the right problem. Like, men are too much like women, and women are too much like men, which is kind of the abs thing we can get into or whatever. But the wrong solution, right? Whereas we should be talking about, well, men, to be more like men, need to be more courageous and stand up for their beliefs and convictions and actually have convictions. He just says, no, just go sleep with people, like this fake version of masculinity, which is just bodybuilding and sex.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, at least in like the Northeast, like soy boy culture here, you see these guys who like basically they'll change their opinion for whatever woman pays attention to them, and they just follow. Like, they'll present themselves as like, the good guy and everything, and then once they're getting close to a relationship, they'll just abandon everything they hold dear to keep their relationship. It's kind of pathetic, and I don't know how to like whack them out of that.
Yeah, one problem with viewing, I guess, having all these relationships with women that aren't reproductive as somehow masculine is it's actually the opposite of masculine. A masculine relationship is one that's actually reproductive with a woman. But if you have the kind of relationship he mentions here in the first sentence, basically you just have like a parasitic relationship, right? Because you're not creating anything. Probably you're providing the one with resources, but like you're not actually reproducing or doing anything constructive. And to me, the actual nature of masculinity is to bring more order to the disordered world and to actually create and produce. And if you're just sort of entering into this relationship where you're not really doing anything but cooming effectively, and you're just sort of wasting your energy and your time and your resources, it's actually not really a masculine trait to do that.
Right.
Well, actually,
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
So this is sort of something people brought up about masculinity and the male sexual culture, because the thing is, and the reason why this is difficult, the reason why we're struggling with this is because for the last 60 years, basically the only coming of age that society has felt necessary to talk about for men has been literally getting sex. Because it's incredibly easy for young men to fall into a pattern of celibacy, the idea that you're maintaining celibacy by not having sex puts you into the same category as basically just incels, people who can't have sex because of some dysfunction. Whereas Charlemagne's absolutely right that in all healthy societies previously, sexual control generally and celibacy specifically have been considered super masculine traits. There we're sort of missing a component to the puzzle because of the fact that enforced celibacy is the only marker of not growing up that our society is really ready to talk about. Now, this is something that, this is sort of a bad book and a worse movie. It's not such a bad book, but has anyone ever read Into the Wild or seen the movie? Yeah. So it's about this idiot called Christopher Manliss, who's this young kid. He's not an idiot, but it's very tragic. He basically was this young kid who killed himself doing this impossible hike into the Alaskan wilderness and starving to death because he overestimated his outdoor survival skills. But this guy was obsessed with obtaining sort of this manhood. And what I was so surprised reading his biography was that part of this was just a total abstinence of sex. He was obsessed with people like Tolstoy and Gandhi, and he felt that he had to abstain from all worldly goods to attain this kind of, supreme heroism that he was pursuing. And that was the first time I ever heard about sort of a believable, well, not believable. I've seen this in my own personal life, but this is the only modern media I can remember where a heroic sense of celibacy was described. I think it's possible, but there needs to be more markers of it than just not having sex. Otherwise, you just sort of fall into the trap that a lot of, cradle Catholics and Christians fall into, and kind of get trapped in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty good meme about this phenomenon that I've seen before. I don't have it at hand, but it has like a guy saying something like I'm saving myself for marriage, and he's incredibly obese, and he's like obviously a total loser, and it shows like the perfect trad wife envisioning him as her ideal husband. The joke, of course, being that the fact that the dude doesn't have sex doesn't really matter when the rest of your life is a mess. I'm certainly not saying like all like Christian virgins or Christian or celibate Christians or anything are in that place, but I don't think it's a totally uncommon phenomenon either, especially since Christian or otherwise, most people that we know of in society. Most young men that we know of in society that are, or at least that the secular culture presents to us as being virgins or otherwise not engaged in sex, are people who are that way because they're losers, not because they choose to be.
And if you're degenerate in that way, that's just another form of degeneracy, and that should be avoided too. The fat guy, right?
Sure, but let's just be honest. All guys start out as. I was a loser when I was 15. Right. This is the problem, and a 15-year-old is trying to think about how can I stop being a loser? And I know that what I was told when I was 15 is, well, if you have sex, you can't be a loser. So have sex. Right.
Yeah.
So, and I guess indirectly that sort of motivates you to be better. It's a really, that in itself is an effeminate quality, improving yourself because you want to, have sex is, that's almost the definition of effeminacy in a lot of ways, or it's close to the definition, I should say. Having the feminine lead the masculine. But it is, you can see how it's sort of, it's a facsimile, it's a stand-in for the real virtue, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you're saying there.
Yeah, and as an 18-year-old. Loser. I understand this feeling entirely. Like just growing up in, I guess, just so much heavier. And there's been a lot of pushback on this virgin equal loser thing culturally. Maybe it's part of the acceptance movement in a way. Bullying people is bad now, so we can't. Well, I guess it's a positive coming out of that, but it still exists. And I think that this perception of everybody that doesn't have sex is a loser. Clearly wrong, I think. And when you realize that it isn't important, it doesn't actually matter, and as long as you're improving yourself to the glory of God and to better yourself for your future family and for your current family, that's when you actually begin to come into a mature position and stop being a loser, right? And I mean, you guys can probably speak on that better than I can, being so young.
Yeah, just don't worry about it when you're young. Just take, I don't know. I don't want to turn this into Uncle Dave the stream, but I could probably fill an entire Mulbuggian set of letters with my own cringe advice. Hopefully, wouldn't end the same way as it did with Mr. Yarvin, but
hopefully,
certainly would not. But I'm just saying, all men start out at the bottom of this hierarchy, and it's just a process. But the thing is that this bullying thing, I do appreciate people not being bullied for being virgins, but at the same time, it is kind of that's the worst possible way to go about this, right? Because you're hiding behind the mother character asking people not to bully you. It's just and I'm not saying that you're doing this personally. I'm just saying that this is not the way it should progress. The way to deal with this is just to stand on your own 2 feet kind of thing. I don't want to be presumptuous, but you guys get what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just have one point about this, and it was about the idea you were saying, Dave, and I felt this anxiety too. It's like when you're 14, 15, 16, etc. As a young man, you feel the sense that you're a loser and you need to become something really quick. And it's just, it's like that meme where indeed modernity is a punishment in and of itself, because this ridiculous meme of self-actualization from your own excellent achievements is this kind of Brahmin style story that is being dosed to the entire population, when really only a subset of people that are going to ascend into the professional class, into high arts, stuff like that. Only that sort of set of people have that kind of self-actualization journey where they have to do something extremely special beyond the mean, the bell curve of people. And so it's just this ridiculous macro environment of liberalism where nobody has a simple track anymore. Like you said, Dave, in your video recently, the simple track of the normal middle class life with that typical trades job, it just doesn't work anymore because of the high debt and because of the shrinking opportunities along that vector. So
the problem this is also the problem is the wagey track doesn't work very well either for men, right?
Yeah,
no.
It doesn't.
Let alone the trades, right? The lower white collar stuff. Sure, it's great, and it's nice to have, and women value that and all that stuff, right? But that's not gonna
no, it doesn't.
That's not gonna give you the coming of age kind of I don't want to use coming of age, but you know what I mean. That's not gonna give you sort of the sense of yourself that I think a lot of young men are looking for around 18 or 20, right?
Well, I think they just want. I don't think many of them are even seeking a special thing. I think they just need a simple conveyor belt of, working class, middle class jobs that are clear to go along and are just, reasonably status enough that it justifies a marriage. That's all they need. They don't need any of this special cuckoo nonsense. It's just, we have such a problem where basically because of the elite capture system we have with the universities and all this other stuff and the high debt, basically it's just really just the Brahmins that succeed at all. And it's just
yeah, I don't want to. It's so many avenues to this problem. Definitely.
I mean, even if they were in a good situation, they probably couldn't get married anyway, because we're dealing with people that are, the people that are under the age of 25, maybe 30. It's just a nightmare. I mean, you said you're Uncle Dave. I hope you don't know too much about the people that are under the age of 25, let alone 20, where it's just.
Hey, watch it, buddy.
Yeah, it's like I don't think I could even say anything.
You're implying something that I'm not following.
Well, he's saying how desperate it is for us. Like, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Everybody has a sense of longing for something. We don't know what for because there's a void. Obviously, that void should be filled by some sort of religiosity, but that's entirely fallen apart.
So I don't actually know how bad things are. All I know is that
may I recommend?
I had things worse. I had things worse than the people before me by 5 years, and then I was reasonably conscious of how people 5 years after me had things. And from those 3 points, I construct a trajectory, and I assume we've been going down that route. Right?
Well, totally. As an 18-year-old who's like in the dating scene right now in a college town, I'm looking around, and it's every other conversation I have with a girl is, so a second text or a message or a sentence they bring up is, do you smoke weed? Do you I overhear them talking about the one night stand they had the other week, and I'm just like, okay, so I just kind of got to retreat into your hive mind of a church, and that's really the last vestige, and that's the best place to find a girl in the first place.
I would like to narrate an experience I had in a diner in New York a few months back when I was like looking around for potential places to like bring out a date, and I went to this burger joint by where I work, and I remember this woman sat down with her black gay friend, and they were talking about their dating life, and she quote verbatim, she said, well, I'm straight, but I'm also hetero-flexible. I'd like to just see how it's like with the same sex. And
please don't do that voice.
Yeah.
There's no masculinity.
It was just one of those moments where I literally ordered I was about to get ready to order a burger, and I added a martini to just sit back and listen to the degeneracy before me. And I just because these are moments in New York City where I'm not someone who's going to yell, well, the Bible says no. I'm just going to sit and listen and then quietly pray, Lord have mercy, and just document the decline. It was quite a moment.
I mean, for an older person, the correct way to deal with people who talk like this is to either laugh at them or to yawn at them.
Yes.
I mean, pray later, right? But this is pretty pathetic behavior. They know that. They know it's pathetic. That's why they're talking about it, because they want someone else to say, well, they want you to either be scandalized or they want people to be like, no, you're so good, right? The two responses they dread are yawns and laughs, which is the only thing they deserve to get for relating. Whenever women talk about their previous sex exploits in this sort of way, yawn or laugh.
Yeah,
right, so I'm getting into Uncle Dave mode. I need to stop.
DC boy, you implied it, but you need to it's literally metaphorically a bomb shelter. You need to just go into your church and only that subset of people, or the people that are in the adjacent churches, etc. Preferably a Catholic church, obviously, a Latin mass, but that subset of people. And
preferably a Novus Ordo with guitars, but yeah, preferably Catholic.
Preferably an Eastern Catholic, not gonna lie, those are awesome. But yeah, you need to just hide within the subset of people that are within the church, because there is no chance outside of that. Let me tell you, it's just so obvious. And to put to Dave's point, it's not just a 5 years before and 5 years after that I want to give the idea of. It's just that it's compounded generation over generation, where the previous errors obviously mount on top and add to the new ones, to the point where it just becomes very obviously, if anybody uses any reason in the situation, that is basically lost. Where it's our grandparents or your parents or your grandparents, maybe a few of them did once or twice as an oopsie before marriage. Okay, that kind of messes things up a little bit. Marriage is kind of dysfunctional, and then their children.
Plus, a lot of them. This is very common. A lot of people jumped the gun, they had premarital sex.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then so maybe that causes some dysfunction in their marriage. Then the next generation, our parents, some of them in their marriages get divorced because of that dysfunction. And then because they got divorced, some of their kids become homosexual or something like that, or more commonly just watch just degenerate filth like anime or something, not just regular anime, pornography. pornographic anime. The pornographic anime.
Yeah,
No, it's just like a lot of the homosexual kill themselves, or worse, watch anime.
Yeah, but the point is that they watch degenerate anime where it like pornographic anime where it literally causes them to dissociate from their real life identity. So they're literally these people that have watched that repeatedly are psychologically destroyed essentially. And unlike the divorced people, it's questionable whether it's reparable or not. And then so that's like half the kids now, and even some of them are worse than that. And so when we take into the context all of this, obviously it just mounts on top of each other to the point where it just reaches critical mass, and the only thing left is for 95% of people is just going to be complete decline, and then maybe 5% of people that are isolated in their bubble, in their Latin mass bubble, are safe.
Yeah, and I do feel like the compounding effects are really hitting the newest generation, like the 18 and under people now, because when you just ask what they talk about, that it's all identity and sex and politics, and they're barely into their teenage years. It's kind of disturbing, actually, at least for the public school kids. Luckily, outside of that system, most people are still mostly normal, but
it's diabolical.
Yeah, and I think we're all aware that this is probably by design to eventually get to like legal pedophilia or something. Like, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
No one backs me up for that. Well,
I feel
like we're not supposed to say that.
Yeah, I'll say
I'll say this: it's designed to encourage. I mean, people talk a lot about Epstein, right?
Yeah.
And there's always this big mystery, right? I think that I don't know who he was working for, right? But I know why he was doing it, right? Why was he doing all of this weird sex crap and with powerful people? The why is easier than the who, because the why is that people who engage in this stuff are easy to control, right? Like, that's why pedophilia is that's why pedophilia is used. It's used by intelligence services, because once you have people in a compromised position, then you can use it as blackmail, extortion material. You have ownership over them. And the thing that all of these behaviors have in common, all of these practices, they all have in common, is that they make the population easier to control the more the population engages in them, because they become more dependent. They become entrapped by learned helplessness. And sex obsession and Coomerism is a type of learned helplessness. And as a matter of fact, that's how we have to reframe it. I did a live stream with Friended recently, and I missed this great question. And I was reading the chat. That's always a disaster, right? But I hope I'm not hijacking this. But Friended is a big Jordan Peterson fan, and he was saying something like, well, Jordan Peterson, he understands everything you're saying, Dave, and that's why it's his mission to make responsibility sexy again. And what I wanted to tell him is there's no way you can make responsibility sexy, because responsibility isn't sexy. Irresponsibility is sexy. But there's only one thing that's more sexy than irresponsibility, and that's power. Our society was doomed the second it empowered irresponsibility, because the combination of those two forces inside a human population means that the sexual instinct will always point in a perverse location or in a perverse direction. The only solution to this is to essentially try to find power outside of the entire trap. The problem with the Coomer, the one that should be focused on, and the one that will make sense to people in the post-sexual revolution, is not the fact, I mean, it is immoral, but it's not the fact that it's an immoral in a Christian sense, because they won't understand that. The problem with the Coomer is that he's disempowered himself, and he's enslaved himself to a habit that manifestly makes him weaker when it comes to participating with and interacting with the outside world.
But it connects to the religious aspect. I mean, it's very clear what this affects, this stuff, causes there. Like, I mean, it doesn't take reading like Saint John Vianney to like understand that impurity, lust, this kind of heroin just completely blinds a person to any kind of arduous truths. It completely, deafs them to any kind of reason. It completely blinds them to any sense of, it sounds corny, but it's real, like any kind of transcendent beauty. They just, they just become deaf to that. They become unconcerned by, anything beyond the next week's gratification, that they don't care about. Obviously, beyond like this world, they don't care about heaven and hell, obviously, but it's just there's no reasoning with them, and it just requires a more muscular approach. But yeah, it's just it's peak effeminacy, and at some point the discussion has to stop with these people that are on the other side of this. It just doesn't work because of that prime effect where human reason is so atrophied and so weak and so pathetic and just basically nothing, that I barely use it with people anymore, or whether it's, within the internet or anywhere. It's just, that's how it is. So, and then, forget about Demon Mama. That's just.
Well, no, actually, that's an amazing case of somebody who's just plagued. I actually feel really sorry for that individual because they're just so possessed by all of these maladies. Like there's a number of psychological admitted, and they identify with their own psychological diagnoses. So I'm not even insulting them saying that.
Right.
And this person's obviously enslaved. They're a slave to this process that they don't even care to really understand. And I'm not one to hide and mighty. Like sometimes I feel enslaved to my emotions. Like I've been dealing with a certain amount of, not despair, but that's sort of been toying with me a lot recently. And but imagine willfully being part of that, right? At least with despair and depression, you can literally feel the demon's hand on your heartstrings. But when you participate in it, that's even sadder, right?
Right. It seems like you're digesting the black pill. So I mean, once you excrete it, it'll be better.
Yeah, I need to stop though. But anyway, yes, yeah,
It's there's one thing I want to sort of go back to a bit that you mentioned there, Dave. And it's how we know that intelligence services and stuff like that use particularly extreme forms of sexual immorality as a form of control. And the thing is, we know quite explicitly this is what the left does with sexual immorality. Now, I'm not, to be clear, I'm not saying that the sexual revolution, everything like that, was engineered specifically with political purposes in mind, certainly with political purposes, but not. I'm not saying that the sexual revolution was engineered specifically just to sort of get one over on conservatives and to have guilt material. But we do know it is used in that way, and what I mean by that is all throughout like all the many strains of progress we've gotten. With the left, always what they'll say is they'll point to whatever forms of sexual immorality are common in the public, and they'll say, well, I guess that means you should adopt more. Like we constantly got this with the gay marriage decision. They point at the centrists that might have been against gay marriage and said that. And said, well, you're not living up to biblical morality when it comes to sexuality, anyways. So why do you care about this? Or they would, can you guys please stop spamming me on Discord? It makes this pretty difficult. Whoa, guys, like, are your comments that important? Talking to you, Cringe Walker in 21st.
Sorry.
But yes. So yeah. So but this is the thing we got all the time with gay marriage. That they'd say like, oh, if you have sex before marriage, why do you even care about gay marriage? Clearly, you don't care about any of this traditional stuff. If you with the banned porn stuff, what was like one of the number one comments you'd get from people? Oh, have you ever looked at porn? Well, I guess that means that you can't call for banning porn. Otherwise, you're a hypocrite. this this is like I mean this is just one of many ways, but sex is always used as a form of control, and yeah, that's my point. Thanks, Cringewalker, for interrupting me.
I recently discovered a great way to respond to people who call you a hypocrite for stuff like that. You just go like, no, I want you to join my struggle. It usually convinces them it makes them pause and think, well, if I want to fight against something that's causing poor mental health for people, and someone wants to call me a hypocrite because I might suffer from it too, just be like, well, no, I want you to join this struggle that like is challenging what's causing pain in people's life. And usually it makes them pause and think. And I killed the chat again.
Well, actually, I Settlers Lament, I have to go a little bit early tonight, but I'm still good for another half an hour to 40 minutes. There's one thing that I kind of want to talk a little bit about, and this might be related or not related, but considering there's a gap, I'll just bring it up. So I did this conversation with Friended and someone else on his little Thursday night podcast, largely defending Academic Agent's video about the Coomer-Right. It was something to that effect. And they're obviously trying to be base centrist, so they have to every now and again dig up some right-wing content to react against. And I guess what kind of depressed me about that conversation is that I thought we were making some kind of progress in terms of the conversation about getting over sort of these well-known conversational hurdles. Everyone at this stage, everyone knows porn is unhealthy. It's that technology is destroying our attention spans and our relationships. We know that this idea of dissolving these questions into questions about personal choice is a ridiculous obfuscation tactic. And yet at the same time, and we also know that these conversations are frequently devolved and steered onto economic issues, even though no one has any intention of addressing the real economic issue. Just something like jobs creation programs. And, so we know all of this. I know Friended has brought this up when he's reacted to leftists, that this is sort of their tactic. And yet, when I'm sort of playing the right winger, when they're trying to play their centrist game and I'm sort of steelmanning the right wing side, the conversations has come right out of 2014. All of a sudden, you need to cite all of your sources to show that porn is bad and causes sexual dysfunction. Oh, we don't have a problem with relationships. It's just a bunch of people making the wrong decision. Oh, how do you know it's not economics? And what's really the problem is that men have too high standards for women. In fact, they want to date the trad wife, and there aren't enough trad wives available, so they need to get over it. All of these things have easily recitable answers. I've recited them so many times that I'm blue in the face. The statistics exist to back these things up if you have them quick at hand, which of course oftentimes you don't when you just go to someone's podcast. And we have to rehash these disagreements again and again and again. We have to pretend, we have to kind of go back to where Sargon was in 2014 and remind them that this sort of libertarian angle is not stable. And that saying like, oh, it's economics. Oh, men are the people who are driving the relationship crisis by their too high standards. These are all bullshit, but we need to rehearse the argument. And then of course there's always 4 snarks for every single attempted argument, right? And at the end of an hour of talking about this, there's absolutely no progress made. You don't get the sense that they'll ever retain any of these counter arguments or come up with better arguments for their own side. And I don't know, that kind of got to me a little bit.
Well, what's the point of debating them when you could spend that time convincing someone already damaged and wanting to get out to find a better way? Like I've kind of seen no point in debating the source of the pause, but rather the victims of the pause are more useful.
Well, because you're debating ideas online. And I mean, if I was personally helping someone, I'd much rather spend my time personally helping someone damaged by this. But if you were to talk to the young men who are attracted to these damaging behaviors, they'd universally have the same idea as somebody, well, as were presented by people like Adam and his co-hosts. They're not necessarily progressive ideas. They're not the ideas that originate this problem in a near sense, but they are the ideology of the young men who fall into these patterns of behavior. This is what they tell themselves, and it's all bullshit. And you can snark about it. It's easy to make jokes where it seems like you're in control, but the arguments that support this kind of lifestyle, especially with what we know now about how relationships have played out in a post-porn age or a post-internet pornography age, they just don't stand up to any kind of sustained criticism.
One thing I've seen too in regards to that particular video that Academic Agent made is a lot of the criticism of it was sort of sidestepping the main argument, and I think half of this is just because people can't actually seem to actually listen or read to an argument and understand it. But a lot of what I saw in counterpoints was like quibbling over the definitions. So they, instead of arguing the main point, they just argue definitions, and they're arguing about the definition of a tomboy or something, which just has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, like nobody's against tomboys. I married someone who described themselves as a tomboy. That's not the issue. It's not also female fitness. It's the fact that it's pornography.
Well, and it's the fact that it's the feminization. It's feminized men in particular that's the core issue, and so much of the counterpoints from all over the place just aren't actually addressing the core issue.
Well, I mean, what you described, and then especially your debate with Adam and Sitch there, is exactly what I was saying earlier, where, obviously, there's just that underlying fact that the virtue of chastity and purity is extremely rare outside of sanctifying grace. That's just clearly true. And those people, including Adam and they're lulberts, right? I watch them frequently. There's just, you become detached from human reason because of that. And obviously, I'm pretty sure I don't know if he's an atheist fully or just, obviously he's non-Christian, right? Adam Friended, is that correct?
He's like a pro-theist because he thinks it's societally advantageous, right. But he doesn't like have any. I mean, these people know that the arguments that are being made on a macrocosmic level, they know that they're valid. The problem is that they don't have a way to make conservative, reactionary, or right-wing ideas about relationships fit into sort of a cool brand they want to present to the outside world. And I understand that they're professionals, right? But there's no way to be kind of like to have anti-porn be part of your political persona online if you're running a comedy show.
To me, this is an opportunity to destroy these bigger personalities that aren't pushing the correct ideas, right? If the idea is fundamentally correct and they and the audience even knows it's correct and all of the points against it are just bollocks, I actually agree with the thing you put on screen earlier from AA, is that this is clearly something to keep pushing the bayonet in on. There's really no reason to relent on this when the position is not sustainable to support degeneracy, and we have a chance to keep fanning this flame until it burns out the degeneracy, hopefully. I mean, I think AA is really right on what to do here in terms of the reaction to this whole argument that's got started. There's really no reason to relent on it. And definitely, I think the correct approach here is to be on the offense in terms of attacking degeneracy.
Okay.
But what is... Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but you want to bayonet a muscle. What you're doing right now is you're bayoneting a bunch of Jello. I mean, they don't care. I mean, I actually respect Adam Friended a lot as an entertainer, but they're just there for the lulz. Like, you nail them to the wall, they're just going to slide away because they don't care, right? The people who actually take this stuff seriously, unfortunately, are not in our audience. And this is one of the things I struggle with, is trying to come up with who my audience is. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you to an extent, but there's a missing piece.
I think there's some value here, because what ends up happening is the person who is kind of like the Britisher character, we'll say, and that's probably not entirely fair to Friended, but the person who's sort of in this centrist position or just sort of neutral position if you push it this hard enough, ultimately they just end up being exposed as just another liberal, another progressive. I think you've seen this actually happen with someone like Shoe on Head, where, you know, eventually this whole centrist position, especially as society becomes more and more bifurcated, there's nothing left there to stand on, and you just end up revealing that you're actually just part of the left, just with some different flavoring on top of it to make it seem like you're not actually on that side of the thing. So I think there actually is value in you know, sliding the jello off. I don't know.
Well, I just think there's a fact here, and this is an extension of what I was saying before. There's just a underlying fact here that I think has a bit more explanatory power for it. It's that it's not the bifurcation with these people is like Adam Friended and the Lulberts and Britisher, etc. Those people, like the classical liberals, it's not you know, the classical liberals and the distant right against the progressive left. It's all the seculars versus the people that have any sense of theism about them. So, like you said, Dave, the point was they're jello because they don't care. Well, why don't they care? Because they're not theists and they don't have any moral foundation, essentially. And I mean, that's just the basic point there. And then with the vice of impurity, because, you know, like you said, they just repeat these terrible arguments from literally 10 years ago. Well, why do they keep doing that? It's not about the ideas itself. It's the fact that impurity, ironically, makes you hard of heart. And so, of course, you're going to be a Lulbert individualist. I don't care. Oh, you know, that anarchist guy that was on the debate there with you, with Adam, he was saying, oh, well, they're free to destroy themselves. They should, you know, be able to do what they want or whatever. It's this cold-heartedness, this hardness of heart that causes this entire problem. And, you know, no matter how much you push that bayonet of just complete truth through them, you know, it just makes a mess.
But I think also someone in chat mentioned that, you know, attacking the jello or whatever is the main point. But I think Academic Agent's point that you actually gain subscribers from doing this is very valid. Like, there are different points to attack on, right? So, you know, I saw that Friended was like, you know, very pro or interested in MMT at some point, and like that's a really good way for him to lose, you know, libertarian subscribers, and it's a good chance for you to pick those up. And, you know, here apparently Academic Agent has skyrocketed in subscribers, almost like 1,000 subscribers due to the line of attack he's going on. So it's not even just about like it's you literally can just take their audience. You can take the members that can be convinced from them and bring them into your own side and slowly grow your own thing. So I think there's a lot of advantages.
That sort of brings us back to the Shoe on Head issue. I mean, you say like Shoe on Head's a cautionary tale. I don't think many people see Shoe on Head as a cautionary tale. I think they see her as more of a success than most of the right-wing people online.
Well, of course she is. You know, of course they're all way more successful than us, and we want to invert that state of affairs. And I mean, according to Academic Agent, he's essentially profiting from this endeavor that he's going on, which can only be a good thing.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know about what you guys are referring to Shoe. I mean, I think, you know, she's old and single, I guess, old 30. But she doesn't, I don't know what you guys are talking about. She doesn't seem that bad. I talk to her about every day in a group chat. You know, she reads James Burnham, which is cool. I don't know. Wait,
what?
Yeah, she was reading the Managerial Elite the other day.
I mean, in that case, I'm just gonna.
She didn't have the attention span to last through a 20-minute conversation with Adam and Sitch.
Depends if she's high, I guess.
I'm just gonna suggest that she's holding on to her weird, like, pseudo leftist Yang Gang almost type stuff publicly to not lose subs. I don't know.
I think I shouldn't expose Shoe on Head.
Yeah,
I'll get kicked from the group chat. But yeah, I mean, we're cool. There's you know, but yeah,
really,
yeah,
really.
Well, I would be more interested.
Yeah,
I mean, she's really gone to the wall for Bosch and the rest of these.
Yeah, no, I agree. We bully her for that a lot.
Actually. I mean, this is I mean, Bosch. I don't know. That whole Vosh is the most boring person in the world, but he's part of a very interesting phenomenon, an online conversation. But it's a very, very destructive one as well.
I mean, well, Vosh is just unapologetically evil, right? So there's the defense of him, I think, is also like incredibly disturbing. And people are accusing me of being a simp. What are you talking about? Get out of here. Look, I'm merely saying, okay, that I just think that perhaps she's not as bad as you guys perceive.
Okay, there's one problem with this thing with online characters, right? Is that, you know, online YouTubing, it prioritizes sort of dramatic reversals. But you can only do it a few times. It's sort of a one-off thing. And so as a YouTuber who sells sort of dramatic reversals, like say Hunter Avalon, right? I mean, you know, I can tell that probably in about a year or two, people are going to be really angry at the Democratic Party. And a lot of the coolness is going to flow out of these left-wing communities. And there's going to be a resurgence perennially of a post-left or a right-wing online space somewhere. And these people are going to try to accomplish another move, but you can't after a while. Because then the sincerity of it is sort of is transparent. Now, and I've changed my opinions on a lot of things, but at least I can walk people through the thought process. These people like Hunter Avalon, they can't move back again. No one will take that seriously.
Yeah,
and this sort of creates a problem for them, right? They become spoiled. I mean, because their relationship to politics is fundamentally feminine. They're driven by the polis rather than them trying to lead the polis. You know, if I think that, you know, MMT is a good theory one day, and then I think it's a bad another because I read a different paper, and then I change my mind again, at least I can walk you through the thought process of my opinions about MMT or natural law or stuff like this. You know, like, and I've had opinions that I've changed multiple times back and forth, but I can walk you through it because I'm actually directing my opinion through will and through logic. But these people like Schoenhead, it's obvious that they're moving with the crowd. And the magic of the conversion story that's not very well considered or driven by actual passion, it only works once. You know, I used to talk to this guy called Faraday Speaks. Yeah, and you know, he was upset because he couldn't figure out, after he came out with his big confession about how he used to be an infamous alt-righter. The story wasn't very consistent because he kept on changing, you know, how you know, his previous beliefs. But when we were friends, he used to talk about how upset he was that no matter what he said now, if he said like, "Oh, I'm a left-winger, I'm a communist," well, then, you know, he got out of a right-wing rabbit hole just to jump into a left-wing rabbit hole. If he said, "I'm a centrist," then he was a toady for the New York Times. And if he said he was a right-winger, well, then he relapsed. Nothing he ever said was taken seriously. And I told him to his face back then, I said, you know, this is why nobody does what you did. This is why, you know, you can change your mind in a mature masculine way. But once you start crying about how that the idea took control over your own brain, you know, as if a woman might be abused by some kind of Svengali, or it might be taken advantage of by, overpowered by a man, then no one will take you seriously when you try to lead them in a different direction. There's always a rejoinder waiting in the weeds. And a lot of these people, like Hunter Avalon and Schoenhead, they've developed this very effeminate relationship to politics. And that's not how politics was ever meant to be. And people understand that. They could do a transition once because they can pawn it off as some kind of religious revelation. In Faraday Speaks' case, it literally felt like God came down from the heavens and told him to not be a right-winger. But you do that multiple times and the fakeness is transparent.
Well, when it comes to, and you mentioned, you know, this religious experience, when it comes to right-wingers, that's typically exactly what it is. Like if somebody goes from the right to the left, Hunter Avalon was a Christian, and then he announced that he was an atheist, and then he became, you know, like a Democrat socialist or whatever, like a Vosh admirer. Same thing with this. You guys might be familiar with this older YouTuber. I don't know if he's still around. I think his name was like Mr. Repsion way back. He used to be a Christian.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, way back. He used to be a Christian way back for me. I mean, that's like
it's one of these new
15.
atheist types. Like, what's that girl's name? Like, her name started with a
Jacqueline
J.
Glenn.
Jacqueline Glenn, like that. Yeah, exactly like that.
It used to be more right wing. Used to be a Christian. Became an atheist. So most of it has to do with like religious. Was a Christian, right? But the convictions at least outwardly change. So
that's the thing, though. Like, it's never just one thing changes. It's like they completely abandon their entire personality, which suggests to me it was just all a mess of cope.
Yeah,
that's because obviously without the one source that's ordering you, that's like giving you your identity, because identity doesn't come from within. It's not some self-actualization. It's received. Sounds kind of feminine, but it's true. It's true. And once they get rid of that, once they cut it off, Hunter Avalon, whether it's Hunter Avalon or it's Demon Mama or it's anyone, you start getting, and then the left in general, that performative vibe that the left has, where it's like they're all theater students. It's this plasticine kind of masked, surface level identity that people put on as a kind of consumer item or just some kind of momentary expression. And that's the kind of identity that they live in. Of course, because it's in line with homie, it's in line with, liberation. You wouldn't want to be stuck with one identity for too long. That's kind of restricting. That's kind of slavish. So it's this kind of plasticine, surface level plastic fake mask that people can change every few weeks, whether in big ways or in small ways, usually just gradually.
So true.
Brilliance.
Yeah, there's a book I have from the 80s that has a comic. I'm going to send to you 21st, and then I'd like you to share it whenever Souther's done.
Aren't there more? Yeah, aren't there like a couple more tweets we're supposed to get to?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, there were. I know. First, there's a super chat for $5. Speaking of which, it's been an hour and I have one super chat. We have over 200 viewers. You guys are being a bit stingy. But thank you very much, BHW, for the $5 Canadian. Okay, first I want to say, I don't know. I really don't like getting super chats insulting people. I make it sort of a channel policy. If I'm having someone on, I'm not going. If it's someone I don't know, I'm not going to read a super chat that insults them. I mean, I will read this because Shu isn't on the show. But like when Sargon was on, I got some super chats insulting him, and I refused to read those. Unless I thought they weren't really that mean spirited, but there were some that were pretty mean spirited, or at least I thought were. That I refuse to read. So I really just don't like these. I don't know. Maybe
that's an excellent policy, by the way. I totally endorse that. That's a good idea.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd even do that for like Vosh if he was on my channel. But to be clear, I mean, I don't like for the audience. Like, if you want to make jokes about like Dave or someone, like we're buddies here. I don't care. But like, if I'm having someone that's a guest like Sargon, I'm not going to let you guys insult him. So yeah, I mean, this chat isn't that bad, but I still do, I don't really like this stuff, even though this is relatively mild. Could see Shu going trad if Owen Benjamin made her his second wife in northern Iowa.
I mean, I'm way out of date on what's going on with Owen Benjamin, so I don't know if that's a realistic scenario or what. I'd probably rather not know. Well, okay, so I brought up Shu in the first place just because like sometimes her tweets show up in my feed. Like, I don't know why.
That's probably my fault.
And okay, maybe it is. And all I see is her Twitter feed, but I look at this feed and I'm like, this is not a right-wing person. And there's this kind of old school position of being like anti-SJW, or we might call it now anti-woke left, but there is no anti-left position distinct from the right wing, right? So ultimately you have to pick a side, right? If you're going to be anti-left, then you must be on the right wing. There is no other counter leftist force. And if you're not going to do that, well, you're kind of still just a leftist.
Right. There's no dissident left, right?
Yeah. So it's like, that's why I brought up her as an example, because she is a fairly prominent example of one of the people who seems to be like basically against the really woke stuff, but still not willing to go on the right wing. And as we've seen this like conservatism attitude that's more like dial it back a little bit but not stop it just is totally unworkable. And that's why the only real counter leftist position is the reactionary side. Anyone who describes themselves as anti-woke, anti-left, whatever, you ultimately have to take that on board, or just, the right's never going to accept you as an ally, because we recognize that you might as well just be a member of the GOP, if that's your strategy.
I have a pushback, though.
Okay.
I mean, this is something for millennials my age. Eventually, progressivism is going to fall through, like in a big way. I don't know if it's going to be during the Biden administration, but we're seeing sort of the first prefigurations of its fall. Yeah, it might take another 80 years. Who knows? But when that happens, well, I guess this concern doesn't matter if it's 80 years, but I imagine it's going to be the next 10 or 15, where a lot of people are going to become disillusioned with progress. There's going to be a lot of women in their 40s that, I mean, maybe Shoe on Head will be one of them, that will be coming out of progressivism going, oh my God, I was taken for a ride. There needs to be a narrative that brings them back into some kind of fold in an acceptable way, and in a way that is reasonably comfortable. I know that this sounds, for the guys out there, this sounds probably like I'm white knighting or something. Believe me, you don't want to have a bunch of 40-year-old women as your enemies.
I believe that's how alcohol got banned at one point in time.
Yeah, no, exactly. Right. These people have a lot of energy left and a lot of spite. They won't have families to keep them occupied. And so, you need, to quote a famous president, it's better to have them inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. So the right has to have a narrative of forgiveness. Otherwise, it's creating a problem for itself that's pretty substantial.
I feel like most, and this is a pretty normie take, I think, but I think it's also true. Like someone in the chat just said, women will become super reactionary when they run out of eggs or whatever. I think that this is just kind of not accurate.
I didn't say anything about running.
I know.
I said what will cause them to become to become disillusioned with progressivism is when progressivism starts tossing them down, when it consistently demotes them in the progressive stack again and again and again, and they start realizing that's not going to be. This is not Stefan Molyneux.
Yeah,
40-year-old women, like, they've made their choice at that stage. Probably, they're not going to have families, or at least not biological ones. Some exceptions, obviously, withstanding. What's going to cause them to, just so I can clarify, what's going to cause them to jump ship is that the progressive establishment is going to deprioritize them, and they're going to understand that this is the pattern going forward. And once that happens, the sexiness and the excitement of being progressive is going to is going to not be. I just read the posted chat that's going to diminish, and they're going to jump ship.
I think that women are just not very good at thinking for themselves, and will just follow the dominant culture.
Well, then apply that to Shoe on Head.
Right, I do apply that to Shoe on Head. Like, that's exactly what
I guess maybe you should be dating her.
No, absolutely not.
This is why
I'm not really sure that.
I don't think that this. I don't think that women will become just reject progressivism.
Okay. We do have more tweets to get to, and we have a couple super chats. So I feel like we're moving past this part to the conversation. 21st for $2. 21st reaction. Is it effeminate to beg for super chats? No, it's based in chat. As the Basicus Maximus, I'm the one that gets to make that decision. And let's see. Women Rock for $5. This is going to be terrible, isn't it? I haven't read this one yet. Don't disrespect world record holder JPB for longest time spent without sleep. He admitted it on Joe Rogan. 28 days because he drank orange juice. Okay, that was nothing like what I was expecting. Okay, I don't know what
The profile pic.
I have to add to that.
I do have an. Is it the last super chat?
What?
Sorry, never mind.
Okay. Does anyone have anything insightful they need to add about Jordan B. Peterson staying awake for 28 days?
That it was obvious hyperbole, but it's just the way he delivered it was the worst ever. I laugh at that because it's the problem is that he delivered hyperbole like it was some kind of court testimony. Like if I said awake for 28 days, like people would understand that I was exaggerating, right? But that one clip from Joe Rogan was just absolutely nuts.
Okay, I have not seen that interview. And Patrick, for $5, you can't put the burden of the unillusioned on the ones who did the right thing. I'm not really sure what that means.
Yes, you can. What are you talking about? Of course, that's always the burden of a leader is to look out for the people. I mean, it's to look out for the people who weren't doing the right thing. What did Moses do? Did Moses just murder all the Israelites when they started worshiping idols? I don't know.
I feel like that's the fundamental message of Christianity.
I see your position on this in terms of the 40-year-old women. So, and I'm not disagreeing about having a narrative, but I don't really believe in these large organic conversions of groups sort of like waking up. I mean, I think the events of the last 2 years kind of show us that this just isn't the thing that's happening. I don't really think that these women who got screwed by progressivism are ever going to wake up. I mean, if we look, I think a really salient example is if we just look at the, dwindling majority demographic of the U.S. I mean, are they waking up to what's happening there and how they're being screwed? No. I mean, I don't really think these women are going to make a big shift. Now, the ones who do, I mean, absolutely have some sort of narrative if we can to allow that to happen. But I don't actually think progressivism will be undone in any significant way by that at all, because I don't even think these people will have the self reflection or reflection about the society to even figure out what happened.
Right. History shows that cultures like these don't change; they get conquered and replaced.
Yeah, reminds me.
Of nope. Speaking of you, 21st. Tarot. I don't know. I googled it. I think it's Spanish. Sure. For $5, Trato 2015 for $5. Why is it that the right wing always thinks that we are in a turning point to the right? The 80s, the 2000s, 2012, Trump, and now every month seems to be the turning point. Yeah, I mean, this comment is completely right.
Did I fall into that? I guess I did a little bit there.
It's because DC has to get paid.
I mean,
everyone. This is a very common phenomenon on the right. I think it's partially just optimism. That we can't we don't want to accept just how terrible it is, and we always want to think that there's going to be a change around the corner, and we look to everything that seems like a change. With that said, I think looking backwards, say the 2016 Trump phenomenon seems to be quite a bit different than past right-wing phenomenons. I know there were conservatives at all those dates. This time, this guy mentions saying that this year was really the important one. But I think the things that were unleashed by 2016 and Trump were qualitatively different from the other supposed turning points, even if it didn't turn out with the things that we exactly wanted. But anyone got anything to add to that?
It's the fuel of the outer party. That's the only thing that fuels it.
I will never live down the accusation that I submitted to optimism.
It's the same thing with the Nicki Minaj stuff, which is actually on topic, right? It's like, oh, now the based black man is going to, take the fight to the Biden administration because Nicki Minaj said the thing. No.
Yeah, we all know what's going to happen now because Biden's in, BLM will become a terrorist organization or something that the state will crack down on. and they'll be conveniently forgiven in like 2024 for when the next Republican comes along.
So yeah, moving on to the other tweets we had. 21st. That's your time.
It's very clearly a cue. One second.
Go ahead.
All right.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's one important thing. Gamer Toad here. I mean, there's not much to say.
What's Gamer
There's
Toad?
not much really to say about Gamer Toad.
This needs context.
There's nothing that can be added to make Gamer Toad any better. I just wanted to make sure everyone could see him. Move along, 21st. Yeah. So this is a tweet thread. This is a thing. And this guy, I don't know. I don't really remember seeing him before, but the impression I got is that this guy is like not like super well known, but he's like a micro celebrity in trad cath circles. Current American citizen. As a practicing Catholic, I tell you this, please, for the sake of your soul, have sex before marriage. And it just
11K followers.
It's really for the sake of your soul. I mean, why did he put that?
Yeah, I mean it's very intentional. If you read more of the thread, you'll see like this is the argument. He is specifically arguing that it is spiritually damaging, not to do this.
Really, I didn't actually read the rest of the thread.
Yeah, and he actually, it's all incredibly demonic. He says that in a different tweet. That you should go to confession before you receive communion if you're doing this, but you should still do it anyways. So he's not even like denying that this is a sin, even a mortal sin. He's accepting that and saying you should do it anyways. And can you scroll to the last tweet from this guy in the tweet thread, 21st?
Yeah.
Yes, and he says here, and no, I'm not telling you to go out and have sex with as many random women as you can. I'm telling you to go out and look for a wife, and if you can see yourself marrying a girl, you need to have sex with her within 3 days. Okay, now there's no way for what this guy's been asking.
This must be a joke, right?
I really don't think so.
This is the state of American Catholics.
Oh no!
This guy has stuck this, and like this guy was mutuals with some pretty well-known Catholic figures. I mean, not like super well-known people, like classical theist. I know he's really well-known in conservative Catholic circles, and he was mutuals with this guy. So it's not like maybe this guy is just really sticking to the joke. But he's been I've looked at this guy's Twitter account since making these tweets, and he's been defending it. And he, like I said, he has an established Catholic channel, Twitter account. So I don't know if he if this is a deep cover trolling operation. But he hasn't really given any indication of that up to this point, other than just this beat as ridiculous as one could imagine. But can you go to the other tweet I sent you, 21st? Yes, and he said here, I'm actually very homophobic, transphobic, Trump supporting, traditional Latin mass attending Catholic. Libcats, please don't follow. I feel like this is actually the most important tweet of all these. Because other than that, this guy just sounds like a degenerate Coomer, and for all you know, he could just be like a nominal Catholic. But here he at least claims that he's a TLM Catholic.
Again.
Yep. And yeah, it's just we live in a society. I don't know what else to say.
Well, how do we know that this guy isn't like 22 years old? And do you know how you have like really like everyone has like a really crackpot idea like when they're 22? Like my crackpot idea was that like the Gnostic Gospels were like pointing to like a Buddhism Christianity merger when I was 22, like, and that there was like the secret Buddhist like strain of Christianity. It's all absolute nonsense, but like I believed it when I was 22, and if I had a Twitter account, maybe I would have tweeted it. You know what I mean? How do we know this isn't like him just being an idiot?
Well, I mean,
we don't.
It clearly is him just being an idiot,
right?
But the thing is, it's not just some random dude with 10,000 followers. It's also like look at the first tweet there. the I'm a practicing Catholic one, he does have 550 likes, and if you look through the responses, the vast majority of the responses are people dunking on him. But he does have supporters here. So again, this is not just one insane dude. I wouldn't bring
usually when you have a long thread, you only retain like 10%. He's getting like 40% that's keeping the likes throughout this.
Yeah, and I'm sure a significant amount of it is like the libcaths that stumbled upon this, but a lot of it isn't. I saw responses to him that are clearly of this same Coomer-Right demographic that were continuing to cheer this on. So this isn't this isn't just him. I've seen this before. I remember. I remember a couple of years ago. I think this was actually after you did a stream with this figure, Davis Arini.
I remember him.
I'd never really watched anything from him, and I saw you did a stream with him, so I went to his YouTube channel to check out what he was doing. And I remember I think the first video I watched, he was actually giving basically the same advice, and he claimed to be a Catholic. It's kind
of a very boomer thing. I mean, I remember thinking that he had a lot of very boomer tendencies, right? This idea that like maybe the rules don't apply to me, kind of thing.
Yeah. So I don't think this is my point is that this isn't just one crazy dude. This is something that I've seen before, that we see in the comments and coming up from other figures. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, we live in a society who wants to add on to this.
21st. Oh, sorry.
I mean, you clearly have to be like in a very bad spot to be living like this, and then an even worse spot to be like a self-professing Christian Catholic, and then tweet about it publicly and promote this degeneracy and sinful living way. I mean, people that walk in the dark are just. They're just ignorant to the truth. I don't think there's any other excuse for this other than like ignorance and probably just malice and, like you said, demonic influences.
What were you going to say, Quinch Volker?
I was going to suggest the comic I sent you from 1987. But is zooming on it. This is all I can think of. This is from an architecture book I have from 1987. Do note that the author might be a time traveler, as he didn't write conformist, he wrote confumist, which I find this. Zoom a little bit more closer. I can barely see it. So I feel like this is the society which you live in, Ceceler. Just everybody is told to like express themselves, but they all, curiously enough, end up looking like the same clown copy pasted. And it's only like the gentleman in a suit who's actually standing out. I don't know how we got this way, but something about like telling everybody to just like express themselves in like the most ridiculous, passionate way possible has brought out like very bad coomers everywhere. I think this is 1987. I think AA and D would probably like this comic a lot because it's basically the society they live in now. But it's a nice little like old timey meme from 1987. Oh, I also have this. This is just something I saw on the bus today. A local storage center. New York City has fewer closets, but our kids aren't afraid to come out of them. It's just like this is just like a giant sign everywhere.
It's just for a storage facility.
Yeah, you can imagine what you'll. I find all kind. I take a photo of the degeneracy I see all around me, just because I want to document the fall. Because I know that this is going to be around in 20 years. It's all going to be ashes. But someone has to document what looks like a fall. What does a fall actually look like? That's my little 2 cents.
About the thread, the guy snuggled in the middle of the thread is a kind of, truth, because obviously. The evil one, the snake, always puts in like a little grain of truth in it, as a kind of manipulation. But obviously, the first thing to say is the cliche, verse. Better to have a millstone around his neck and everything. So, if you want to be so masculine and violent, well, that's the verse for you. But he also says, and there's a grain of truth here. Now, maybe you think, do not countersignal me if you claim you and your wife never had sex before. You're either lying. 50 plus, or you happen to an extremely rare freak situation. True, you know it's an extremely rare freak situation. It's unreasonable to expect others to follow your example. Now, maybe you think dooming men to be alone and virginal at 30 isn't that bad. They may be alone and virgins at 30, but at least they have Jesus, blessed be his holy name. I won't even say that. Being alone and a virgin at 30 is a horrible state of affairs. They will blame this state of affairs on the church. They will blame this state of affairs on God. They will say, not even wrongly, if only I hadn't been religious, I wouldn't be alone and a virgin. Telling people not to have sex before marriage is setting them up to apostatize. So, of course, like the evil one who seems to be his daddy, as JLP says, Satan is yo daddy. Unfortunately, it's just, yes. And you know what that's called in like this just modernity? It's called purification. It's called getting all these apostates out of, getting the filth out, just sewer system, just get it out, and only keep the people that aren't effeminate, that know how to sacrifice in exceptional historical periods. It's a purification period. And so it's purifying and getting rid of these people. But at the same time, it is a reason why, the walls of the church aren't increasing with any people, especially the young people, because young men aren't offered any, serious on-road to marriage in any reasonable way. They're left on their own, kind of like that. So it's like, they don't receive the bribe, they don't come in. But at the same time, it purifies all the reprobates out.
I sorry. Okay. I think that there's this, I've lost my train of thought because someone's in the chat and it has distracted me now.
Is it Shoe on Head?
Yes.
It actually is Shoe on Head. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it is. Verified account.
Say her name 3 times.
No way.
Wait, where is she?
She's in the chat. You can scroll up a bit. Yeah, well, fantastic.
Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary.
Where? I don't see her.
She's right there.
Control.
She's still single because I'm actually older than her.
Stop cooming.
Okay, I do not see Shu anywhere.
Just Control F. I'll show you in the chat.
Oh yes, I recalled what I was going to say now. Oops. I think that this type of mindset is just kind of going back to what we were talking about in the beginning. Is this total feminized view of the way people operate. He's falling into the lust of the flesh when he says that, men, he automatically assumes the worst. He automatically assumes men will just blame the church and then they'll, reject Christ and Jesus and the gospel. When in reality,
reject the church.
Yeah. When in reality, a real man would acknowledge the shortcomings of himself and rely on God and rely on the church to hopefully become sanctified through Christ. I think that this just shows where his mind is at and that he is actually walking in the darkness, like Paul talks about in 1 John. It's like this person is not aware of the truth. Capital T. I think that I'm sure being alone at 30 is a horrible state of affairs, but when you are in the church, she probably won't be alone.
Okay, well, let's clarify. Alone.
Yes, you will.
Like, you mean unmarried?
Oh yeah, no, that's not exactly what I mean. I just mean like.
Okay, but like, if it's not like if sex doesn't get you towards marriage, then how are you going to be more alone at 30, having had sex with a bunch of women who broke up with you, than you will be not having done that?
This is what I said at the beginning of the show.
There's just these half implications that make no logical sense, right? I wasn't married at 30, but like I wasn't more alone or less alone because of past sexual history. You know?
Yeah, you don't achieve anything by actually doing that, right?
Yeah.
The whole point is to eventually move yourself towards having a family. Insofar as being alone or not being alone has any meaning, other than just having friends, which somehow in our post-sexual revolution age we have less of now, the only way you're not alone is if you join a religious community or if you start a family, in an absolute sense.
Yes.
And manifestly, we see that this whole idea of this sleeping with people does not generate that outcome.
Yeah, that's what's the idea being smuggled in here, or in the first tweet, and then in this one, he basically outright says it, is that if you're not having sex basically regularly, then your goal of marriage and family is not going to be achieved. But I mean, if you have lots of sex, you might end up having children, but it's not going to be the circumstance you were aiming for. So where does this assumption come from?
To what degree do you think we're arguing against forces that aren't really conscious? That's my suspicion here.
That's what
do you think that this person can actually stand with any of us in the same room and make this argument? The only way this works is because he has a little Twitter mob and he can come up with one-liners that sound good in isolation with 300 retweets behind them.
That's exactly right.
Well, he even knows it's wrong because he says he acknowledges that it's a sin and that you need to go to confession for it. And yet he is still promulgating this idea, which in itself is a sin. And so it just doesn't make any sense. He knows it doesn't make sense. I don't think he would stand for it.
People going to hell rarely make sense.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why 99% of people are irrational. And just to keep score, presuming that you will be forgiven for committing the sin when you go back to confession is yet another sin called presumption. So don't do that, folks. Especially, that's a very frequent sin that people make, is that they presume that they will be forgiven. But as St. Alphonsus Liguori said, in some ways he keeps a counter of all your sins, and if you reach a certain amount, your grace might be retracted and you might never be forgiven again. And in some cases this happens with the very first sin of when a kid reaches the age of reason. There's been situations of this. So presumption is very dangerous.
Okay. 21st. One, Saint Alphonse is not like dogma. Two, I want to be very clear. Even if that teaching is true, it refers to people being struck dead for their sin. It's literally not possible for the sacrament of confession not to work.
No. That was my point. That was the point that he made in that particular speech he was making, is that you don't know if you're going to be alive the next day.
Yeah,
so
I know, but I feel like just spreading that stuff without the proper qualifications confuses a lot of people.
Okay, well, sorry about that, but still.
It just I know normally when people hear that without the proper confession, without the proper qualifications, it can be damaging.
Most good ideas have that little typical bar graph where if you have like 10% of them, you're reasonably good. And if you have 90% of them, you're reasonably good. But if you get into the 50% zone, it's really dangerous. That's one of them,
That's very true. That's very true.
I think you're running a little to the 50% area there,
Well, there was something else here. I'm trying to remember. Oh, yeah. It was that if you look at this tweet here, the reason and that's why it's very dangerously effective, is if you look here, he is appealing to that insecurity that people have, which is not fully invalid, that, it's very possible that even if they join the church, that they won't ever get married because of the current situation with society. And he's appealing to that insecurity here because, of course, everyone's part of the zeitgeist, including people in the church, where there's this very individualistic, you're on your own in terms of pursuing people. I mean, obviously we don't have like parents, arranging anything, not arranging a marriage itself, but arranging meetups, all that kind of stuff. That kind of conveyor belt doesn't exist for people anymore. And he's appealing to that, somewhat valid fear that, that they won't get married even if they're in the church. And that's why, they should just be evil.
I
actually, sorry, I thought it was muted. Can I say something real quickly? I think that the fear of most young men when they're in their late teens and early 20s, and I'm repeating myself, it's not that they won't get laid or won't get married, it's that they won't stop being boys and develop their own center of masculinity. That's their fear. And it's not an irrational fear, but it's just, we're supplying it with the exact, like most things in the modern world, we're supplying it with the exact wrong cure.
So what yes, well said.
Well, you're tempting me to go into the Uncle Dave thing, which I promised I wouldn't.
No, Uncle Dave is very based.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
I have to go in like 5 minutes, but cool.
Okay.
Cheers.
I tried.
But yeah. So I don't know. I'll do some more super chats. BHW for another $5. Childless female millennial energy already gamed by the globalists. CRT escalates to this will be the Holodomor. I mean, the individual parts of this message make sense, but I'm not really sure what this all means together.
I was also confused by that one.
Yeah, it just kind of sounds like a Mad Libs of like right-wing talking points. I endorse everything you said, BHW. I have no idea what you're trying to say. Inquisitor Z for by the way, guys, it's Z, it's not Z. You're wrong if you call it Z. Inquisitor Z for $2 if anything is going to make them double down. I assume that was relevant when you sent the money. No idea what that's referring to now. Sam153 for $5. The 2030s will be interesting with millennial disillusion. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Anyone have anything they want to add for that?
Say that
The
again?
2030s? The 2020s?
Are they not already like disillusioned?
Yeah, this is the decade of millennial disillusion. This is the late 30s, early 40s or the 30s and 40s for most millennials, right? Like this is the decade. The 30s will be post-disillusionment.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who are young right now are like in this delusion that, oh, it's going to be like the 1920s all over again, right? Without realizing that time period has already came and gone. We're already in the fascist state right now.
Someone was responding to me, Cousin Groipley, saying, you can always be saved. What he is saying is contrary to Christian doctrine. I just want to clarify yet again, once you die, you cannot be saved. So there is a point where you cannot be saved, and you can die tomorrow because your heartbeat can stop. So that's the point.
Yeah. And Inquisitor Zed did explain what he was talking about. He said he's referring to 40-year-old single women when he said, if anything, it's going to make them double down.
Oh yes, it's talking.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't have any expert experience with this really. But you know, the trope of childless women becoming upset with their life decisions when it's too late is, I think there's some truth behind that trope. But I don't think it's really produced much either. You know, that's been going on for a while now.
Well, I mean, this is just another form of like because these people are college educated, maybe they're school teachers or something like this. They expected more out of life than what they're getting. You know, they probably went to university or college, and now they're becoming, we use the word disillusioned, we could use disaffected. And some people are pushed to, I think actually most people in this position would be pushed further to the left and into the arms of the state rather than, what it is where we'd like them to go.
I feel like this pattern has repeated before. Dave was saying how, maybe these 40-year-old disillusioned women will turn, but they tend to, including with, the inner city populations, this is how the cathedral works. It creates more problems, and it uses the reaction to the problems in order to make a power feedback loop to reinforce. Well, the reason why things didn't go well for you is because this minority of people, of reactionary people, that are still not on your side. Even after all this time, they're still against you, and so you just persecute them a little more.
Yeah,
this will
be the 6th time the cathedral has caused a degenerate decline, and they're getting exceedingly efficient at it.
Nice.
Yeah. And Cayman Miles for $5. The Krugen. I don't know. I'm sure I'm pronouncing this
American
wrong.
Krogan.
Okay. Said something similar on MGTOW. There aren't enough born fundamentalists and BPDE trads for all you convert by sword.
What does that mean?
Why do people send nonsense?
Okay. I mean, what he's trying to say. What he's trying to say is that there aren't enough potential trad wives in existence, so you need to find a girl who isn't who isn't a potential trad wife currently and make her one.
I mean, that's possible. That is what's going to happen to you, but
you can just be like me, wait till you're 30 and date someone 25 and just pick a different generation.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a part of the extremely online tradcath whatever circles, Christian circles. If you go to any normal conservative church, you're going to find the gender balance is if anything skewed towards women. And I'm not, to be clear, I'm not saying every single woman at a church is going to be as faithful as they need to be, especially on these types of issues. But still, that's going to be where you're going to find these types of people. Just because on autistic tradcath circles on the internet, it's like 95% male, 5% female. That doesn't mean that in real life that's what it's like. Actually, I mean, even autistic tradcath
go to daily mass. Actually, like that's actually mostly females.
Yeah.
I found that the females are like almost all over 50 though, which is kind of a problem.
Or over 30, which
in fact, I see almost no one my age in church at all. Like I see almost no millennials in church.
Yeah, I mean, I guess mainly what I'd recommend is looking for specifically young adult groups. If you're not doing that, then yeah, you are going to not have a lot of people in your age range. If you live in a big city, at least it shouldn't be too hard to find a young adult group. I don't really know how densely populated where you live though is, Charlemagne. But yeah. Yeah, so I know, I don't want to get too much into this guy's tweet, but I don't know. I feel like this is kind of not entirely correct. Yeah, women rock for $2. That's kind of a gross insult, so I'm not going to say it. But thank you for the money. Lucas for $9.99. Thanks, guys. You're welcome. Thank you for the money. And Jack Harnda plus the Australian dude. In my experience, telling women that I'm waiting for marriage has only increased how much they are attracted to me. I think they just like a man. I think they just like a man with convictions. Even inspired a woman to do the same. Well, that's good to hear. I mean, I would say that that for many reasons you shouldn't just like go looking for the normal type of women, just your average woman anywhere, and expect her to be your trad wife. I mean, and, I'm not even saying that you need to find a woman who is in the perfect position to be a trad wife. Not and so we're clear. Like I'm using the term trad wife colloquially. I know it's obviously an autistic meme, but I know the audience knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, don't expect some random girl on Tinder or at university or whatever to be a good fit. But yeah. But this is this guy's experience, I suppose. Not I'm sure he's not talking about random women on Tinder. Anyone have anything to add?
I mean, I think that it's a lot having to do with phrasing. I mean, I feel again like Uncle Dave, but people, when they talk about their sexual convictions, they talk about them like, well, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that and I can't do this. Like, that's the absolute wrong way to do this. The way to say is like, I'm a convicted Catholic and I follow the church and our culture is fucked and degenerate. And, that's what I believe about the mess we're in. And, if you are fine with that, if you're fine with those views, then you can come along on this ride with me. And if you don't, then we're probably not going to make a good match. And a lot of women will respect that. But the thing is, I think this gets phrased in this negative way. I think a lot of it has to do with the Christian culture in the 90s, where they were trying to sort of round themselves up into American normalcy. And that's the worst thing you can do. The thing you want to do is embrace the radicalism and kind of walk into it a little bit, just as part of your character.
Yeah. Don't really have much to add to that. Colon for $5. If a woman likes you enough, she will adopt your views without even realizing it. Yeah, I mean, I don't totally disagree with this, but again, I think the main issue I have with this sort of mentality is the expectation it could breed, that this means you can just date like whoever, again, the random girl on Twitter, and expect that she'll turn out exactly as you want her to, because you're like based in Chad and alpha enough.
This only works if you're over 6 feet like me.
Yeah, that's actually kind of what I was about to say. It depends. I mean, they won't change their opinion based on what you think if they think lowly of you. If you're not a respectable person, or if you don't hold any type of authority or convictions, then so it's really about becoming, like, kind of looping back around to what we said earlier, becoming better for yourself and in that regard. Not this won't work if you're just not trying in any other way. So you don't want to fall into that trap of being like, oh, I can save her, because maybe you can't.
Well, if you are like something she's into, and you're not like desperate, then you won't have to like save her. She'll save herself by like adopting your views. It's like you don't really have to be honest, good looks does most of the work for you. It's just the facts.
Guys, I have to get going now, but I'll talk to you guys later, okay?
Have a good night.
Yeah, no worries. Peace. Yeah, so yeah, that's that. That's all the super chats. What else do you guys want to talk about? What's going on? That's all the tweets.
Should we talk about how Nicki Minaj's giant
twerking, he's a base right winger now,
to save the West? We haven't actually really talked about that yet.
Yeah, I mean, the Nicki Minaj in the title was mostly just clickbait.
As you said at the end of the stream.
I mean, it seems to have worked. My views have been pretty good. But no, I don't know. I mean, okay, it's like 50% clickbait. The other 50% is when our dear friend here, Cringe Walker, coined the term Coomer-Right. It was specifically in reference to Nicki Minaj. Yeah, so I guess that was the other reason.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of right wingers who, like, a week ago were talking about thought patrol and everything, and then the second Nicki Minaj questions a narrative that the right wants, it's like, oh, my princess, my queen, blah blah blah. It's like, come on.
And how many times are we gonna play this game too? It's like Kanye and Minaj and these other.
I want to defend Kanye briefly. I think the Kanye phenomena was quite a bit different from.
No, I
from
agree.
the standard like left winger becomes right winger, agrees with the right on one thing trope. I did a video about Kanye a while ago. I think the stuff he was talking about, I think it's mainly because he became a Christian, but I think the stuff he was talking about was different than just the standard Nicki Minaj type thing.
Right. What was the effect of that? It was a co-opting of it to like this type of Brexit, like Christian Walker type thing. If you're unfamiliar with Christian Walker, good. I think that this. We'll see this, and I remember in 2019 there were like Trafalgar polls coming out. There were like 30% African American voting for Donald Trump in the 2020 election. It's like it's how does DC find this thing to be most profitable, and how do they use that to their advantage? And I'm seeing these TPUSA type accounts that I follow on Instagram for some stupid reason, just like, oh, Nicki Minaj is based and red pilled now. It's so absurd.
Well, how many times are we going to go? How many times are we going to go through this? I mean, right. I can't even count how many people were so-called based on red pill, and it's like it's just the other side of the coin where people see like AOC at that gala or whatever, and then they're like all retweeting pictures of her in the dress, and it's like, why? I even saw the Daily Caller, Ben Shapiro's org or whatever, made like some sort of headline image where they basically just made a really awesome communist propaganda image for her. And it's like, why is everyone spreading attention to this thing? I mean, Nicki Minaj is a total degenerate. Why are we even spreading information about this person in our circles? Just every time it happens, every single time the right-wing Twitter sphere just seems to fall for it. It's so tiresome. Even fairly based culprits like the Columbia Bugle, I think it's called, which seems to be a good paper, will fall into this trap, and like the Babylon Bee, and all the people who are like basically very pro like dissident right Trump at least side politics, and they're all just still falling into this trap. And I only see a few people, mostly the ones who are either like American Mind types, or our sphere are the ones who don't get in this trap. And I'm like, when is the rest of the right wing going to figure out this, to just start ignoring these people? And it just it's still just like calling out the hypocrisy. Like, we're calling out the hypocrisy of AOC in 2021. Like, what are we doing? We're expecting Nicki Minaj to like accomplish something for us in 2021. Are you kidding?
Right.
Me?
And
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Charlemagne, because you've actually just been destroyed with facts and logic. NKVD Commissar Tulsi says for $5, Nicki Minaj isn't based or red-pilled, but that doesn't mean her influencing 22 million followers isn't a net positive for the fight against science, which should be trusted. And of course, everyone here trusts science entirely.
I mean, yeah, but like, who follows Nicki Minaj? It's a bunch of NPCs, people that already are programmed to a point where they cannot do critical thinking. Like, they don't participate in critical thinking. They're gonna see this, they're gonna go, oh, Nicki Minaj believes this thing. Then they're gonna read an article that they saw on Reddit or something and change their opinion based on, oh, this expert's TM. This is a code.
I mean, as someone else says in the chat, isn't it the fact that that the African American community is like the center of science non-trusting, which of course is bad. We all trust science here. But if hypothetically someone wanted to further the cause of science non-trusting, wouldn't it be important that she is helping spread that in that community, since that's the epicenter of it to begin with? Someone just said this. I don't know. We don't live in a society.
I have to point out, like, if Trump had won the elections, we would just have the same situation reversed, where we would all be all the hyper science trusters, and the progressives would be doubting all the vaccine stuff. It's like, why are we playing this game?
You said the bad word.
Yeah, because we wanna. I mean, Brookings Institute has to make money somehow. Like, that's why we're playing this game. DC is a game to make money. Yeah. Like,
I think we have to start, like, we need a word for people that look back to the cathedral for like hope of power, like with the Nicki Minaj stuff, and somehow call them like basically a tower of salt. They look back at Sodom while it's being destroyed. They're salt towers. We need a word to describe that, because that's what they're doing. Stop looking back at Sodom. It's being destroyed.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, and as to why like right wingers embrace these people with open arms, it's because, I mean, we'll stop doing this when we basically do what you guys have been preaching for a long time now, which is new elite, new parallel institutions or institutions. When that vacuum of the right wing elite is filled, then we'll stop embracing any vagrants that are just so happen to walk in the saloon. Like, that's is the when
biggest and fattest when I've ever heard.
Oh yeah, no, of course, yeah, but I mean that's the actual solution. The possibility of the solution is slim, obviously. Biggest and fattest win, but yeah, I mean that's my 2 cents. That's what I think.
There are no right wing elites to fill in that role. It's, I mean, any semblance of that is in like these, in these more distant spheres that are anywhere near the elite, because distant right boys in our sphere aren't really of that cut from that cloth. It's just these people are like nihilistic Nietzschean, just really smart, I guess. Engineering mindset, like these are the kinds of people that are in that spectrum. Like the people that are like Yarvin or like Land or those kinds of people. Those are the ones that at least commiserate with the current elite in some way. Or the best example maybe would be Peter Thiel or whatever, and he's an atheist and like all this stuff. So it's like I don't know, man. It's just
Isn't that the whole theory of the network of tens though? Is to like form.
Well, what we have to do is we have to contact Michael Malice and get him to invite Nicki Minaj on and watch Mulebug together, and then he can commiserate with her over their mutual hatred of police, and that's how you'll do it, right?
Wow, commiseration. If anybody wants to know about the speech, the homily I was talking about, it's Saint Alphonsus Liguori's "Do not put God to the test." That's the homily, and you can just hear it from his words.
So true. So where are we? Do we have more to say? Yes? No?
I have a screen share.
Sure. I'm assuming it's the 9 First Fridays devotion.
I don't know. You'll find out.
Okay.
Hey, it's the Virgin Mary, is it?
Yes, Our Lady of Sorrows, pray for us.
Yes, and what are those? How many of them are there?
7.
7 swords stabbing. They just stab right into her, and that's what obviously.
That's actually that's referenced in the New Testament where the prophet comes to Mary before or during Christ's baptism and says, "You will have a sword through your heart." Yes,
that's right. I don't want to be Pastor. It's like Dave was Uncle Dave, and I'm gonna be like Pastor Billy, Bo, Joe, Bob, Daddy Frank, or whatever, something stupid. But I don't know. It's just we get this general vibe in the right wing of these guys, especially the atheistic, like Nietzschean ones, like BAP or whoever. Their idea, their implicit idea is that being super masculine is about having the most power and the most physical strength and all that kind of stuff, but not taking care of this other stuff. When there's a serious problem with that, because I get that big muscles kind of help. Being 6'10", like cringe walk. I don't know how tall he is. It kind of helps, but there's this fundamentally underlying thing where it's like we're going to get our strength and power from ourselves and have our will to power, and that's what the right wing man is. But there is something deeply effeminate and degenerate within that, and that's this little nestle of pride at the center of it, where we think we're going to be able to do it on our own, when it's just not true. And in fact, the truth is that you're weak and pathetic and dust, and your heart could literally stop tomorrow, and you could just get in a car accident tomorrow. So you're not very strong. So, of course, masculinity is about strength, but we have to understand that there's a kind of like prideful right-wing stereotype that's been made recently.
Well, yeah, no, this is a problem as well. Like that you bring up the pride on the right. It's very annoying. Like just calm down sometimes, people. And it'd be a lie to say that I don't participate. We all do. But we gotta just embrace the virtues. Prudence, fortitude, courage. We can't. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah, being physically strong, but also being virtuous and more morally strong. That's where these problems will be solved at.
Right, and of course, like most of these guys, it's not united. The right wingers aren't really united by religion. Clearly, it seems to be united by natural law. So there's natural inclination to be, we're ascending these dominance hierarchies, and I'm the alpha and you're not, and I'm big and you're small or whatever. But to be honest, that's kind of effeminate and something that it doesn't appear on the surface to be so, but humility and like servitude is not effeminate. It is a bit more masculine. suffering for others, making some kind of severe sacrifice, even if it's not physical, I think is a bit more masculine than some of these other tropes that we have here. It's like more St. John Vianney staying in a confessional for 15 hours a day and like being like starving and he's like super skinny, and less of, Genghis Khan. Just a little less.
So true, 21st. So true. So are we done?
Yeah, I think so.
Shill time.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Go ahead and shill. 21st. Did you want to shill the 9 First Fridays devotion?
Sure, and how about we shake it up a little bit? Do the 5 First Saturdays, because that's for the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And last time I checked, it's not very masculine to do violence against women, and so impurity is just this thing that really stabs her heart. So maybe you should stop that. Do the 5 First Saturdays. That gives you benefits, goodies, and stuff that you might want.
Okay, and your channel?
Oh, it's 21st Reaction. It's my name.
Okay. You making anything?
Yeah, I might make a video about that soon. I like making the compilations, so if you want to watch those.
Okay. Charlemagne?
Check out Academic Agent's cigar streams, which are now rescheduled. I think they're going to be on Wednesday, but we're going to be doing some interesting stuff on the cigar streams in the coming weeks, months, and I'll be on some of them, but people will definitely want to check those out because they should be pretty top-notch quality based on what we're planning.
Okay, DC?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Settler. I appreciate it. You can find my YouTube channel, David Carlson, and yeah, I'm hearing all the good Catholic stuff. I think I was the only non-Catholic. I think I'm.
No, unfortunately, there's 2 Protestants. Cringewalker's a Lutheran.
Okay, well, yes. Well, yes, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on. Check out my channel.
Anything specific you're doing, DC?
At the moment, no, mainly real life stuff that I don't really want to talk about yet. So
okay. Well, I mean, the real life stuff would be you're planning on signing up for RCIA and submitting to the Pope, right?
Oh, totally, dude. Yeah, you got me.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Everyone in chat, pray for
pray
for David Carlson's conversion.
You just had to Google it. I didn't even know what that meant. Yeah, I'm on it, dude.
I mean, I don't think it was very cryptic. I asked everyone to pray for your conversion to Catholicism.
Well, I figured I had to Google it before you said that.
Yeah.
Come
on. And everyone also remember to pray for Cringewalker's conversion too. Cringewalker, go ahead and chill.
Technically, I was never excommunicated, so I'm technically both Lutheran and Catholic.
Oh no!
I was raised and fully confirmed.
You see how they laugh?
Laughing at your sins.
I have my Substack, which I'll put in the chat if you want to share that. luthnight.substack.com. My YouTube channel is by the same name, Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker. It's mostly just very poor attempts at music and other things. Maybe I should try to start doing videos like everybody else. Stop being lazy. I guess pray for my safe transition to Europe because I'll be starting a PhD soon. But yeah.
Oh, that reminds me. You have to show off my shirt.
I don't have a screen camera to show it off. Yes, I
told you to be ready for that.
I gave Settler some shekels and bought a nice big shirt. It makes a nice comfortable, comfy shirt for the night. Especially as winter approaches here in New York. I don't know what else to say. I guess I do a lot of stuff at Lambda Bible Study. That's also another good channel to check out. As do you, Settler.
It's been a while, honestly, since I've been on his channel, but it's a pretty good channel. And everyone, buy my T-shirt. Buy my T-shirt. Pray for DC and Cringewalker. Pray the Rosary every day. You're not on the team if you don't pray the Rosary every day. I know that's about it. I was planning on saying something about the Canadian election. Don't really have anything to say. It was the most boring election in history.
Oh, it's so
That's really my only take about it. Is it's the most boring election ever. I don't know. Don't really have much to add. I am eternally black-pilled on the fate of Canada. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for the money. Thanks for the views. And thanks for the prayers for DC and Cringewalker.
Amen.
Peace.
I appreciate it.